A block of wood is currently 9 points clear of the Conservative Prime Minister Boris Johnson, despite him having an 80-seat majority in the House of Commons, though he may not have 80-seat majority after Thursday, when there is a very real live possibility of a rock-solid Conservative seat falling to the Liberal Democrats, not least because parties to the right of the Conservatives are going to take thousands of Conservative votes because, frankly, more and more people have concluded that whatever else he is, Boris Johnson is not, in fact, a Conservative. He's a bounder, he's a cad, he's a mountebank. He should have been horsewhipped before he even got into public life. Should have been horsewhipped out of it by many an angry father, father-in-law, cuckolded husband, by people that trusted him and found their trust misplaced, betrayed. Any number of people told us, did tell us, that Boris Johnson was a thoroughly disreputable cove and was only Conservative as long as it fitted him, and it no longer seems to fit him. The question of open borders on the Channel coasts, the question of repeated lockdowns and restrictions, the stealth taxing of us through green taxes, since Boris Johnson slipped into a polar bear suit up in Glasgow at COP26, the betrayal of the North over HS2, the whole stamp of Boris Johnson's Conservative government is actually of a Blairite Liberal. That's why I've been saying to you throughout all of this 2 years, those idiots, half-wits, who kept describing Boris Johnson's government stuffed to the gills with gays and ethnic minorities, pursuing the fads of greenery, pursuing every fad of COVID-19, people said it was the most right-wing Tory government we've ever had, even called them fascists. They're not even Conservatives, never mind fascists. If you think that is fascist, you need to study more. If you think that's a right-wing government that we have at Westminster, you obviously are too young to remember Margaret Thatcher, Norman Tebbit, in their boots, kicking the working people of this country all over the shop. But the majority of Conservative MPs are not like that. Or at least they're not like that if they think it's going to cost them their seats, and they're going to discover on Thursday in North Shropshire that the Conservative voters don't really like it very much. They don't like the fact that the boats keep arriving on the beach. They don't share the perspective of people like me, that however bad that is, deplorable that is, avoidable that is, it's still a trickle compared to the numbers of migrants, asylum seekers, call them what you will, that are arriving in France, in Greece, in Germany. A trickle compared to the numbers that are arriving in Turkey, in Pakistan, in Iran. The Conservative voting base doesn't see it that way. They see boatloads of young fighting age men arriving on the Channel coasts and being hustled away in a taxi to a 3- or even 4-star hotel, which is no longer bookable by the ordinary holidaymaker or traveller in Britain. They see an endless, apparently, with a 64% success rate in the claims for asylum, a bill that will run forever. That's not what they voted for when they voted for Brexit. The Conservative voting base does not like all this greenery, doesn't want to scrap its boiler, doesn't want to have to buy an electric car by 2030, only 8 years from now, doesn't want to pay increased taxes, to wrap ourselves in the green tinsel of Extinction Rebellion, doesn't like the fact that the Metropolitan Police stands by while people nail themselves to the motorways and bring everything to a halt. The Conservative voting base didn't vote for that, or at least didn't think that that's what they were voting for. And perhaps most troublingly, this country appears, and we'll know at 8 o'clock, to be headed back to where we were last year at this time, at least for the most of us. Isolated, unable to see our elderly parents, unable to visit people in hospital, unable to bury people in funerals, unable to go to the pub, to the restaurant, to the club, to the football stadium. We may well be on the verge of a back to the future series of measures right after Christmas, because whatever else the government with its follow the science mantra is doing, it's not getting on top of what they say, and I'll come to that, is a clear and present danger to the National Health Service, to our public health, and even to the lives of very significant numbers of us. The problem is they don't act as they speak, which means one of two things. Either that what they speak is untrue, and that they are deliberately hyping a danger which doesn't exist. If it did exist, why are they frolicking in Christmas parties in Downing Street when the rest of us were cowering behind the sofa, afraid even to kiss our elderly mothers? Well, they were kissing each other under the mistletoe. So you can't have it both ways. Either what they were saying wasn't true, or we've actually got certifiable maniacs running the country, knowing the risks, but locking themselves in number 10 Downing Street and laughing about it as memorable footage of Austin Allegra showed in the course of this past week. You can't have it both ways. Either it is the plague revisiting us and you're crazy, or it isn't quite the plague that you've been telling us, and that's why you were snogging each other. Even the Minister of Health was snogging his aide, caught on CCTV in the Ministry of Health, at a time when he was telling the rest of us we couldn't bury our elderly, we couldn't go to funerals or weddings, we couldn't visit people. He had his tongue down the throat, forgive me, of his parliamentary aide, somebody else's wife at that, I'll add. So when they tell us that the reason for this new panic, despite all the jabs we've had, I've had 3 now, but I'm supposed to panic about Omicron. Is that how you say it? Omicron, which has killed 0 people in the whole world. 0. It was identified in South Africa, and the woman, Dr. Coetzee, that identified it, has become hoarse telling us that whilst more transmissible, it is less deadly than the hitherto prevalent Delta version of the coronavirus. So, numbers in South Africa of people infected has fallen 3 days in a row. In the last 3 days, it's fallen every day, despite a massive increase in the number of people tested. So fewer people are getting it in South Africa, and nobody yet has died of it anywhere in the world. So why are we running to the hills again? Why has Nicola Sturgeon completely devastated again the Scottish hospitality sector? Why is Boris Johnson hinting, threatening to do the same here in England? Why? If it's less deadly and more transmissible, then that means it's good news, not bad news. It's not as good news as the whole thing disappearing, but it's better news if a less deadly variant is becoming the prevalent one, or will become the prevalent one. But in any case, what about the next variant, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one? How long are we going to live like this, with our economy devastated and people going mad? Don't tell me people are not going mad. I'm one of those that has the responsibility, the duty, the misfortune to read the comments on social media that emerge after programs like this. Trust me, there's tens of thousands of unhinged, deranged people out there. I had a woman tell me today that an anagram of Omicron and Delta is more media control. They're laughing at us, she said. She really meant it. Even when someone pointed out that mother-in-law is an anagram of Hitler woman, she didn't get the point. Anything can be an anagram of anything, but people have now reached the stage in this country, and not just in this country. They don't believe a word the government or the state or its mandated media tell it. They don't believe it. More and more of them don't believe it. I walked for 2 hours or more in London this afternoon, in Hyde Park, in Bayswater, in Queensway. Nobody was wearing masks. Nobody is following the instructions because they have lost faith, trust in the government. Not least because they've all seen the footage of the government making hay while the sun didn't shine for the rest of us. Nobody trusts Big Pharma, which won't release the patents, condemning billions of people in the poorest countries in the world to no vaccination at all unless they can afford it. Nobody believes that Big Pharma is disinterestedly telling us we need to have vaccination after vaccination after vaccination, because people just hear the sound of the cash register kerching and the undreamt of bounties which these pharmaceutical companies are banking. People don't trust the media because the media has become merely a font of official information. And if you stand against the tide, if you reveal what the state doesn't want you to know, you end up like Julian Assange, stricken, lying on this bitter evening on a hard bed in Belmarsh, found by the British courts to be quite fit enough to go and face the rigors of 175 years in an American maximum security penitentiary where he will literally never be seen or heard from again. People see that. And journalists, like the arrow that flies in the night, censor themselves. They toe the line. The fourth estate is no estate at all. Its imagined role as a sentinel, subjecting official information to the same attention as the dog subjects the lamppost, is all history now. Andrew Neil in the Sunday Times revealed the scandal that affected pregnant women all over this country. The thalidomide scandal was the great new thing. You were nobody if you weren't taking thalidomide when you were pregnant. It would banish morning sickness, anxiety, except it produced thousands of severely damaged children. It was punted by the same pharmaceuticals. It was trumpeted by the same kind of media, but at least then we had the insight team at the Sunday Times. Now we don't. Now there is no insight team. Now there is no Sunday Times meaningfully. There is no World in Action. There are no journalists that are speaking up against the lies and the distortions and the hypocrisies until they decide that there's a need for a change of the Conservative Prime Minister. That won't mean they'll admit that they were wrong when they ensured the election of Boris Johnson in the first place. The Liberals in The Guardian and The Observer crying their crocodile tears over the premiership of Boris Johnson this day. Nobody did more to ensure Boris Johnson became Prime Minister than you lying hypocrites. But they have decided that Boris Johnson is no longer wanted on voyage. And for them, it's a glad, confident morning because they've never forgiven Brexit, you see. They would love to realign Britain with the European Union, rejoin it if they could. We are run by a collection of fools and knaves, ladies and gentlemen. Some of them fools and knaves at the same time. We are guarded by a fourth estate of charlatans. And the hero, Julian Assange, lies forgotten by that fourth estate in the media in Belmarsh jail this very evening. But I tell you objectively, as someone who's been in politics now for more than 50 years, on Thursday in North Shropshire, the death knell will sound for the premiership of Boris Johnson. What comes next? People say to me, who do you recommend? I wouldn't vote for any of them. But I am sure of one thing. Boris Johnson is an ex-Prime Minister.